and to which the society has then to adapt. But in our case, we don't give people time to adapt to the new changes. We just throw another gadget on top of those changes, and we just keep piling them on. And meanwhile, the psyche suffers, and everybody's depressed and on Prozac and can't figure out why. And our kids are running around shooting each other with Uzis, and nobody can seem to. We scratch our heads. But to these other societies who are outside of us, it's very clear to them what's going on. We're just we're piling too many changes on top of each other, and there's no way for us to adapt to them without this kind of social chaos. And they don't want that social chaos. They like their traditions. They like things stable and secure, and it's the way they've done it for millennia. Why should they change just because we've got all these new gadgets? And so one can respect their point of view, I think, even while recognizing that blowing up buildings and people is not something that we want. I mean, after all, the Japanese could be held up as a model for how to deal with this. I mean, they of course they weren't allowed to have an aggressive response, but they simply picked up the culture and bettered us at it. They make better machines than we do. They make better TVs, better cars. So they beat us at our own game, and that's that was their response. And the Muslims have chosen primarily, and it's. People can say, well, it's really only this one faction of Islamic society. It's the Islamists that really have this violent response, and that is true. But we have to remember, after 9/11, how many Palestinians were cheering in the streets, and how much tacit support bin Laden has from the population who regard him as a folk hero. And that tells you something, that they are mirroring and caricaturing and exaggerating elements within that civilization that are there in common to the civilization as a whole. They might represent caricatures of it, but it's definitely there, and there definitely is a clash between these two civilizations. I don't care what you say.
Yeah, I recently saw the Where in the World is Osama bin Laden, which was a wonderful documentary by the same guy who made, I forget, the hamburger movie. What was that?
Super Size Me?
Super Size Me, right. He went into all these cultures around the world who we think as maybe they're terrorists coming from there, and he just went into the streets and talked to people and saw how wonderful they are. I mean, I showed this movie to my kids, and I said, this is the way people really are in these countries. They're not terrorists. So anyway, we only have a couple of minutes left here. I wanted to ask you to shift gears here completely, is getting back into films. Where do you think that our movies are going in the future in terms of mythology, or are we going to see more of what we've seen with like Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and Spider-Man and that kind of a thing, or do you think that there's another sort of cycle that we're approaching, we're going into, that, as you say on your site, the visionary film, which I talk about visionary entertainment on this program all the time. Do you think we're sort of approaching another juncture where movies will take on a new significance that they have yet not achieved?
That very well may be the case. But, I get the feeling, looking at the new films that have been coming out, within the past decade, that the cycle that began in Hollywood and with Kubrick and Lucas and Spielberg, in the 60s and 70s, is now reaching its end point, and it's coming to a big sunset effect.
That's what I'm sensing.
That's wrapping that development up. And you can sort of guess that because the biggest phenomena always come at the end of any cultural cycle. With at the end of opera, you've got Wagner's gigantic Ring cycle, which is the longest operas ever. And, the biggest suits of armor come in during the 16th century, I think it is, when they're the most elaborate and fully developed just when they're about to disappear because the cannon has brought in gunpowder and rendered that whole age obsolete. And so, the films are getting longer and longer with Lord of the Rings, and they're getting bigger and bigger and more ambitious. I think James Cameron right now is filming 2 trilogies back to back, so he's got 6 films lined up, and all of this has the feel of the end of a fireworks show. And so I think over the next decade we're going to see this thing wrap up, and something new will inevitably come out of all this. Well, there's no way to predict what it is, but
we'll all have fun and we'll all get to see it.
Yeah.
Well, we've been talking to John David Ebert and his website, cinemadiscourse.com. You can take a look at that anytime. John, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. It's been fun talking with you.
Thank you very much.
And everyone, that's a wrap for our show for this week. Join us again next week as we showcase the very best in movie entertainment that inspires us towards positive change and honors the belief that simple choices can change the world. Thanks to our engineers and to Tom Kirsch and the rest of the Catfish Screw Farm Band for our theme music. You can hear more of their really cool tunes at catfishscrewfarm.com. And you can find out more on the internet about Spirit of Film Conversations and the movies we talk about each week and the books and authors and people that we talk to each week by going to my website at spiritoffilm.net. And please tell your friends about where to find our program right here on seventhwavenetwork.com. And remember, you are the writer, producer, director, and star of your own movie that's called your life. So make it a blockbuster and it'll be a classic. Until next time, I'm Randall Albero for Spirit of Film Conversations. We'll see you next week.